It's strange, the things that stick with you. Even now, years later, I can't shake some of the animal encounters we investigated for Animal Quest back in 2025. We saw some truly wild and intense things that year. One case, in particular, still haunts me. It was October 7th, 2016. The place was Wildwood Heights, a wealthy neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado. It was still dark, that pre-dawn quiet that seems to amplify everything. This upscale development, built just 5 years prior, was right on the edge of the Rocky Mountain foothills, all winding streets and modern homes backing onto open space. A woman named Lisa Hartwell, 33, a marketing coordinator, was starting her usual 5 a.m. jog. She'd moved there a couple of years earlier, drawn by the promise of mountain living with city conveniences. She was dedicated to her fitness, rising before dawn to get in her 5 miles before work. It was her sacred time, a chance to clear her head. The autumn had been unusually dry. Wildlife officials had issued warnings about increased animal activity, as deer, elk, and their predators were being forced closer to human settlements for water. There had been several mountain lion sightings, but Lisa, well, she dismissed them as typical mountain living concerns. She kept running, same route, no deterrence, confident that her neighborhood streets were safe. Mountain lions, also called cougars or pumas, are North America's second largest wildcat. The investigation showed that Lisa had unknowingly interrupted the mountain lion's hunt. The mountain lion was tracked and euthanized the next day in the foothills above the neighborhood. Then there was Felicity Grant. It was August 19, 2017, when she arrived at Boulder County Open Space. It's a vast wilderness area, rugged terrain, diverse wildlife. It attracts outdoor enthusiasts, but it's also prime habitat for mountain lions and other dangerous predators. Felicity Grant, 39, was a fitness influencer from Denver with over 5,000 followers. She had planned her ultimate wilderness transformation experience. She was known for her entitled attitude and the belief that her fitness made her exempt from the rules. She'd already caused confrontations at the park entrance, berating a teenage park attendant for suggesting she read the safety guidelines, claiming someone of her fitness level didn't need advice from minimum wage employees. Park Ranger Tom Bradley had tried to brief Felicity on recent mountain lion activity when she applied for her permit. There had been multiple sightings, even aggressive encounters that had resulted in temporary trail close. But Felicity became increasingly hostile, interrupting Tom repeatedly. There are moments when a story chills me to the bone, not because of supernatural horror, but because of the stark reality of nature's indifference. I read about a woman named Felicity, who learned this lesson in the most brutal way imaginable. She chose to ignore every warning, every sign, every shred of common sense, and paid the ultimate price. It's a grim tale, but one that speaks to the power and the peril of the natural world. Felicity, an influencer, had a run-in with a park ranger who dared to question her. She demanded to speak to his supervisor, calling him incompetent and a fearmonger. Another hiker, Maria Santos, a local trail runner, tried to warn her about the dangers of solo hiking at dawn. But Felicity dismissed her with cruel words, accusing her of jealousy and suggesting she was sabotaging a superior athlete. Felicity specifically chose the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail for her solo dawn run, deliberately ignoring the trail close signs, claiming they didn't apply to elite athletes like herself. She even tore down warning notices, insisting that taxpayers like her had every right to use public trails. Mountain lions, I have learned, are among North America's most efficient apex predators, perfectly adapted for hunting in mountainous terrain. Adult males can weigh up to 180 pounds and measure over 8 feet in length, with powerful hind legs capable of propelling them up to 40 feet in a single leap. Their retractable claws, measuring up to 4 inches, are designed for gripping prey, while their 4-inch canine teeth are perfectly positioned for delivering fatal neck bites that sever the spinal cord. These solitary hunters are primarily ambush predators that prefer to attack from behind and above, using incredible stealth and patience to get within striking distance before launching devastating surprise attacks. Mountain lions are particularly drawn to prey that exhibits erratic movement patterns, heavy breathing, or other signs of distress. Felicity began her solo trail run at 5:30 a.m., deliberately choosing the pre-dawn hours to avoid what she called inferior hikers. She wore noise-cancelling headphones playing loud electronic music and carried a backpack containing raw steaks for her post-workout protein meal. The combination of her erratic running pattern, heavy breathing, and the scent of fresh meat created perfect conditions to attract a hunting mountain lion. A 140-pound male mountain lion had been actively hunting in the area and had established a territory that included the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail. The powerful predator detected the scent of fresh meat from over a mile away and began tracking Felicity's movement through the forest. The cougar began stalking Felicity along the ridge above the trail, using rocks and trees to remain hidden, while closing the distance. As Felicity rounded a sharp bend, the mountain lion positioned itself on a large boulder, approximately 15 feet above the path. When Felicity passed below the boulder, completely unaware due to her loud music and arrogant belief that her fitness made her invulnerable, the mountain lion launched itself in a devastating aerial attack. The 140-pound predator struck Felicity from behind with tremendous force, his powerful hind claws raking down her back while his front paws wrapped around her shoulders and neck. The mountain lion's 4-inch canine teeth immediately found their target, clamping down on the back of Felicity's neck with surgical precision. Mountain lions kill their prey through a specific technique that targets the cervical vertebrae, and this male executed the attack with deadly efficiency. His powerful jaws applied crushing press of over 400 pounds per square inch directly to Felicity's spinal cord, severing the connection between her brain and body instantly. The bite penetrated deep into the neck muscles and fractured the vertebrae, causing immediate paralysis from the neck down. The cougar maintained his grip on Felicity's neck while using his powerful claws to secure his position. His hind legs continued raking down her spine and legs, opening deep wounds that bled profusely. Within 2 minutes, Felicity had died from a combination of spinal cord severance, massive blood loss, and suffocation caused by the crushing press on her neck and throat. The mountain lion then began dragging her body off the main trail toward a secluded area where he could feed undisturbed. Felicity's body was discovered 3 days later by a search and rescue team organised when she failed to return. The discovery location and condition of the remains were consistent with a mountain lion attack and subsequent caching behaviour. The contrast is stark, isn't it? The arrogance of perceived invincibility against the cold, efficient hunger of a predator. But the wilderness isn't the only place where hubris can lead to tragedy. It was December 3rd, 2014, and fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across rows of kennels at the county animal shelter. Jennifer Walsh, 25, and halfway through veterinary school, moved between cages with a determined stride, believing every animal deserved a second chance. As a weekend volunteer, Jennifer had developed a reputation for advocating for the shelter's most difficult cases. While others focused on friendly, adoptable dogs, she gravitated toward the aggressive ones, animals marked with red cards indicating immediate euthanization. The dog that would cost Jennifer her life was Diesel, a 75-pound pit bull with a scarred muzzle and eyes that seemed to hold years of rage. He'd been surrendered after multiple bite incidents, including an attack on a neighbour's child requiring emergency surgery. The behavioural assessment was decisive. Too dangerous for adoption. Scheduled for euthanization on Monday, Jennifer had been watching Diesel for 3 days, looking for signs of the gentle soul she believed existed beneath his aggressive exterior. She'd seen him pace restlessly, heard him growl at anyone who approached, watched him destroy every toy placed in his cage. But she'd also noticed what she interpreted as vulnerability, moments when he pressed against the back wall, briefly softening when he thought no one was watching. The shelter's protocol was clear. Dogs like Diesel were never to be handled alone. Staff with years of experience and proper equipment were required for any interaction with red card animals. But Jennifer had convinced herself that Diesel's aggression was fear-based, that what he needed was one-on-one attention. On that December afternoon, with most staff busy and senior volunteers handling other duties, Jennifer made the decision that would cost her her life. She approached Diesel. There are moments in my line of work that stay with me, cold and sharp, for years. The death of Jennifer, a young woman who dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, is one of them. She died because she mistook fear for aggression and kindness for safety. It happened at a shelter. Jennifer was tasked with moving a dog named Diesel to an isolation room for evaluation. Diesel's body language was clear. Teeth bared, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling from his chest. But Jennifer saw fear, not a threat. When she opened the kennel, Diesel seemed to calculate, assessing her position. This hesitation gave her the confidence to slip a lead around his neck and guide him to the small, barren room. Inside, the space was only 8 by 10 feet, concrete walls, a metal chair, meant for safety, but offering no escape. Jennifer removed Diesel's lead, thinking freedom would relax him. He stood rigid, eyes fixed on her. She sat, speaking gently, unaware she was being evaluated. The attack came when she stood and took a step toward him, hand extended in what she thought was a peaceful gesture. But to Diesel, it was a threat. He launched himself across the room, 75 pounds of muscle and rage, jaws targeting her throat. Her scream was cut short as his teeth sank into her neck, severing major blood vessels. His jaws locked, and he shook violently, tearing through tissue and bone. Blood sprayed the concrete walls as Jennifer's struggles weakened. Other volunteers heard her scream and rushed to the door, but it was locked. By the time they got inside, Jennifer lay motionless in a pool of blood. Diesel stood over her, muzzle stained red, eyes still burning. Paramedics arrived, but it was too late. Jennifer was gone. Diesel was immediately euthanized. The investigation revealed that Jennifer had violated safety protocols, ignored warning signs, and put herself in a dangerous situation. The shelter implemented new security measures, and Jennifer's death became a cautionary tale in veterinary schools. They are intelligent and emotionally complex, but also territorial and aggressive when they perceive a threat. It's almost impossible to imagine the power of a gorilla until you see it firsthand, or, tragically, hear a story like Jessica's. They can shift from calm to violent behavior within seconds. Their massive hands can grip with crushing force, and their powerful jaws, sharp canine teeth capable of inflicting severe wounds. Jessica, as I understand it, approached the barrier with her camera, hoping to capture images that would convey the gorilla's intelligence and emotional depth. The gorilla, named King, appeared calm as he sat near the fence. He was a magnificent animal. His massive frame relaxed as he observed the human visitors with what seemed like curiosity. Jessica began photographing him, excited about the conservation message she could share through these intimate portraits. Then came the fatal moment. Jessica decided to reach through the fence to touch King. She believed that physical contact would create a more powerful image for her conservation advocacy. She'd observed the gorilla's calm demeanor and, tragically, interpreted it as friendliness rather than what it likely was, the calculated patience of a territorial animal assessing potential threats. King's reaction was instantaneous and devastating. The moment Jessica's hand passed through the barrier, the 340lb silverback grabbed her arm with crushing strength and pulled her against the chain-link fencing. I can only imagine Jessica's scream of shock and pain, filling the facility as King's grip tightened with bone-crushing force. Carlos and other visitors tried desperately to free Jessica from King's grasp, but the gorilla's strength was far beyond human capability to overcome. King's massive hand maintained its crushing grip on Jessica's arm, while his other hand reached through the barrier to grab her head and shoulders, pulling her harder against the inadequate fencing. The silverback's territorial instincts drove him to continue the assault. His powerful hands inflicted devastating trauma to Jessica's head, neck, and arms, while she remained trapped against the barrier. Jessica's attempts to break free only seemed to increase King's aggressive behavior, as he interpreted her struggles as continued threats to his territory. Jessica's movements grew weaker as massive blood loss and crushing injuries overwhelmed her body. King's grip never loosened as he continued to pull her against the barrier. His territorial fury focused entirely on eliminating what he perceived as an intrusion into his domain. Within minutes, Jessica's struggle ceased as King's brutal assault proved fatal. The massive gorilla maintained his grip on her lifeless form while displaying threatening behavior toward anyone who approached the enclosure. Emergency responders arrived with tranquilizer equipment, but it was too late. Jessica was already dead from massive trauma. Maria had been working as a professional dog walker for 3 years, building a loyal clientele among Mountain View Estates' affluent homeowners who appreciated her reliability and genuine love of animals. She often walked multiple dogs simultaneously, managing up to 6 animals at once while maintaining perfect control and ensuring each pet received individual attention. Maria's income from dog walking helped supplement her day job at a local veterinary clinic, allowing her to support her teenage daughter as a single parent. The Mountain View Estates development had been carved out of pristine mountain forest, with builders required to preserve mature trees and maintain natural wildlife corridors throughout the community. Recent construction of additional homes had disrupted established animal movement patterns, forcing bears, deer, and other wildlife to seek new routes through residential areas. The North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission had issued warnings about increased bear activity in mountain communities, particularly as animals emerged from winter hibernation. Maria was aware of the wildlife warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals during her 3 years of walking dogs in the neighborhood. She carried pepper spray as a precaution and had received training on wildlife encounters from the local animal control office. On this particular evening, she was walking 3 large dogs, 2 German Shepherds and a Golden Retriever, along the community's main street, when she noticed unusual activity near a row of garbage cans. Black bears are North America's most common bear species, with adult females typically weighing between 200 and 400 lb. Mother bears with cubs are, as extremely protective and will attack any perceived threat to their offspring. I've seen what bears are capable of. They possess the strength to break down doors and overturn cars. Their claws and teeth can inflict devastating injuries. When I read about Maria, I couldn't shake the image from my mind. Maria approached the intersection, unaware that a 300-pound female black bear and her 2 cubs were rummaging through garbage cans. The mother bear was feeding on discarded food, while her cubs played nearby. Maria began backing away slowly, but her 3 dogs became agitated and started barking aggressively at the bears. The mother bear's protective instincts were triggered. She rose to her full height and began making aggressive vocalizations, positioning herself between the dogs and her offspring. Maria tried to retreat, but the dogs continued barking, escalating the situation. The mother bear charged, covering the 30 yards in seconds. Maria, entangled in the leashes, fell onto the asphalt street. The dogs scattered, leaving Maria vulnerable as the enraged bear approached. The bear's paws struck Maria's back and shoulders, driving her face first into the pavement. Her jaws clamped down on Maria's head and neck. The bear's claws tore across Maria's torso and limbs, causing massive blood loss and tissue damage. Residents heard the commotion and called 911, attempting to scare the bear away. The mother bear eventually retreated with her cubs, leaving Maria motionless on the street. Paramedics arrived, but were unable to save Maria, who had died from massive head and neck trauma. The investigation revealed that improperly secured garbage containers had attracted the bear and her cubs, creating the conditions for the fatal encounter. Wildlife officials determined that the bear had been acting defensively to protect her offspring. The mother bear and cubs were relocated to a remote mountain area. Maria's death prompted changes to waste management protocols, including the installation of bear-proof garbage containers and an early warning system for wildlife sightings. Then there's the story of Rebecca Martinez. It was October 15th, 2016, and the Georgia sun was setting over her 10-acre property. The constant barking of 40 rescue dogs echoed across the land. It had become the soundtrack of her life. At 34, Rebecca had spent 8 years building her unofficial sanctuary, taking in dogs that other shelters wouldn't touch. The aggressive ones, the biters, the animals marked for immediate euthanization. They'd started following Rebecca's movements more intently during feeding times, their body language shifting from grateful anticipations to something more predatory. But Rebecca, exhausted from managing 40 animals alone and emotionally invested in seeing progress. I've always found it unsettling how quickly things can turn, how a familiar routine, a sense of safety, can shatter in an instant. It makes you wonder about the unseen threads that hold our world together, and how easily they can be severed. Consider Rebecca. She rescued dogs, giving them a second chance at life, a sanctuary where they could heal. But one evening, that sanctuary became a death trap. Rebecca had done her feeding routine thousands of times. But on this particular evening, the air felt different, charged with something more than just humidity. As she unlatched the gate and stepped into the enclosure, her boots slipped on the muddy ground. She stumbled, and the buckets crashed, spilling kibble across the dirt. Rex, a 90-pound dog she had rescued, was the first to move, but something in his eyes shifted. She wasn't the woman who had saved him anymore. She was competition. The attack was sudden and brutal. Rex slammed into her chest, his jaws clamping down on her shoulder. Titan and Scar joined in, their pack instincts overriding years of rehabilitation. For 10 minutes, the dogs attacked, their growls mixing with Rebecca's weakening cries. Three of them, the dominant male and 2 others, were near the northern edge, stirred by the scent of a human. The zookeeper in the observation tower saw her, this lone jogger, and radioed for confirmation that the route was clear. Seconds later, the awful realization. She was inside the enclosure. He shouted into the radio for a patrol, but before anyone could answer, the wolves moved. At first, they didn't charge. They emerged slowly, low to the ground, tails stiff, heads aligned. Camille slowed, confused, not yet panicked. Then they began advancing in that slow, deliberate arc, and she froze. Turning, she saw the empty gravel behind her and started to jog back, faster this time. The wolves matched her pace, then accelerated, their paws thudding against the dirt. She broke into a sprint. The zookeeper watched as she glanced back at the wolves. Near a drainage trench, her foot caught on the uneven gravel, and she fell hard. Before she could push herself up, the lead wolf clamped down on her right thigh, pulling her backward. She twisted, trying to kick free, but another wolf lunged at her shoulder. Her scream carried across the enclosure, high and ragged. The zookeeper sounded the alarm and radioed the rangers. The response vehicle was rerouted, delaying their arrival to just under 10 minutes. 2 more wolves joined, surrounding her as she tried to crawl toward the ditch. The lead wolf released its grip and bit higher, its teeth sinking into her hip. She struck out with her hands, scraping the gravel, trying to push herself forward, but one of the animals bit into her arm, shaking until it tore free. Within moments, she was on her back, thrashing as the pack pulled from opposite sides. She kicked weakly once more, then went still. The rangers arrived within 10 minutes. They found the wolves clustered over Camille's body, heads low. Warning shots sent them scattering into the trees. 2 rangers approached, while another called for a tranquilizer team. Camille lay on her side, clothing torn, deep bites from shoulder to thigh. One ranger checked for a pulse and found none. They covered her with a thermal blanket and secured the area until all 5 wolves were sedated. The autopsy confirmed death by exsanguination, massive blood loss due to multiple deep lacerations, and crushing trauma to the limbs. Her body was transported under escort. That afternoon, Camille's family filed a civil lawsuit against the Thorizu Safari, alleging gross negligence and breach of safety protocol. After a year of investigation, the court ruled in favor of the family. The park quietly settled without appeal. Following the incident, a criminal negligence inquiry and an independent enclo audit were conducted. Thorizu Safari implemented procedural retrofits, installing interlocks and alarms that trigger if any gate remained unlatched for more than 15 seconds. It was July 22nd, 2016. The Oklahoma sun beat down on the dusty grounds of Wild Art Big Hat Sanctuary, a privately owned facility nestled among rolling hills 30 miles outside Tulsa. The 50-acre property housed over 20 rescued lions, tigers, and other exotic cats, in a collection of chain-link enclos that stretched across the rural landscape. The afternoon air shimmered with heat, the distant sounds of roaring and pacing echoing as the cats sought shade. Ashley Martinez, a 23-year-old college student from Dallas, had discovered the sanctuary through social media while road tripping with her boyfriend, Jake, through Oklahoma's roadside attractions. Ashley was constantly seeking unique photo opportunities, having grown up taking pictures at every family vacation and special event. Her phone was filled with daredevil shots from cliff edges, abandoned buildings, and extreme sports activities. Ashley had grown up in suburban Dallas as the youngest of 3 sisters, developing a competitive streak that drove her to constantly push boundaries and seek attention. Her psychology major at Texas Tech University had given her confidence in reading people and situations. But her academic knowledge didn't extend to understanding animal behavior. That afternoon, Ashley and Jake paid the sanctuary's fee for a close encounter experience that promised visitors the chance to observe big cats during feeding demonstrations and educational presentations. The facility operated in a legal grey area, offering interactions that legitimate zoos and accredited sanctuaries would never permit. African lions are apex predators that retain all their wild instincts, regardless of human contact or hand-rearing. Adult males can weigh up to 420 pounds and possess incredible strength, speed, and territorial behaviors that make them extremely dangerous in captivity. Lions are social animals with complex hierarchies, but they view humans as either threats to be eliminated or prey to be consumed. Their powerful jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch, while their razor-sharp claws can inflict fatal wounds with a single swipe. I've always been struck by how quickly things can change in the wild, how a single moment can alter everything. Consider the story of Ashley, a young woman who, in 2018, visited an exotic animal sanctuary. She saw Caesar, a 400-pound African lion, and, driven by the desire for a photo, she climbed over a safety barrier. What happened next was a brutal reminder of the power of instinct. Ashley, excited by the feeding demonstration, saw her chance for a close-up selfie with Caesar. She asked her friend to distract the sanctuary owner while she climbed over the 4-foot chain-link fence. The lion, initially calm, watched her approach. But as she crouched down to take the photo, Caesar's demeanor shifted. His ears flattened, his tail twitched, and in an instant, millions of years of predatory programming kicked in. The attack was sudden and devastating. Caesar launched himself at Ashley, his paws striking her chest, his claws tearing into her torso and shoulders. His jaws clamped down on her neck, his canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae. The sanctuary owner, alerted by the screams, arrived too late. Ashley's movements ceased within minutes. The aftermath revealed the facility was operating without proper permits and insurance, violating safety regulations. Caesar was relocated. Ashley's death prompted enhanced safety education at her university and stricter regulations for exotic animal facilities. I find myself dwelling on the story of Giovanni, a detail that haunts me still. Imagine, frozen in fear, his clients watching him collapse, a pool of blood spreading around his collar. A scream, a desperate swing of a torch, driving back the juvenile wolves. But it was too late. His chest moved once, then stilled. That tragic incident in Iosta, the fatal wound caused by a freak twist as the wolf attacked, it serves as a stark reminder of the unpredictable power of nature. The authorities ruled it a food-provoked escalation, a grim conclusion to a life cut short. 5 days later, Giovanni was buried. Then there's the story of the Lawson family. On July 15, 2016, they arrived at Sundarbans National Park in West Bengal, India. I can picture that vast mangrove delta stretching before them, a maze of tidal channels where the Ganges meets the Bay of Bengal. Ancient mangrove trees rising from the brackish water, their roots creating an impenetrable network. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, but also one of the world's most dangerous ecosystems, teeming with saltwater crocodiles and venomous snakes. Genevieve Lawson, a real estate agent from London, insisted on the most expensive tour. She was, by all accounts, a demanding woman, quick to berate their local guide, Ravi, and dismiss safety warnings as mere fear-mongering. Her husband, David, tried to calm her, while their teenage children, Emma and Jake, watched uncomfortably. Ravi, despite his years of experience, felt intimidated by her threats of negative reviews. The boat was equipped with safety barriers, but Genevieve saw them as obstacles to the perfect jungle photographs she craved. The Sundarbans are the hunting grounds for the world's largest population of Bengal tigers, apex predators uniquely adapted to this aquatic environment. Unlike their mainland cousins, these tigers are exceptional swimmers and have a chilling willingness to hunt humans in water. Weighing up to 400 pounds and measuring over 10 feet long, they possess teeth capable of crushing windpipes in seconds. Their camouflage is perfect among the shadows of the mangrove forest. During the afternoon tour, Ravi spotted fresh tiger tracks along the muddy shoreline. He cut the engine and whispered for silence, explaining that a large male tiger had recently passed through the area. But Genevieve, frustrated by the distance, declared she needed closer photographs. Against all protests, she stepped over the safety barrier and into the chest-deep water, camera held high. Unbeknownst to the group, a massive 400-pound male Bengal tiger had been resting nearby. These tigers are ambush predators, using the water to approach prey silently. This particular tiger had killed humans before and recognized the sounds of someone entering his territory. He slipped into the water, swimming toward Genevieve with only his eyes and nose visible. As Genevieve photographed the tiger tracks, she remained completely unaware of the approaching danger. The tiger closed the final 20 feet underwater, its powerful limbs propelling it through the murky channel. Then, the attack. It erupted from the water with explosive violence. The tiger surfaced directly behind Genevieve and clamped its jaws around her throat. Its teeth crushed her windpipe with immense force. Genevieve's body went rigid as the tiger's teeth severed major blood vessels, causing massive internal bleeding. The tiger pulled her backward into deeper water, maintaining its crushing grip. There's a silence that descends with the snow in the remote forests of eastern Russia. On November 15th, 2016, that silence was broken only by the steady fall of flakes, muting even the sounds a tiger might make. That day, a forestry worker named Nikolai Baronov vanished. His last radio check-in was brief, routine, giving no hint of the silence and blood to come. Nikolai, a 52-year-old, had spent most of his life in those forests, managing patrols near the Cody Allen Mountains. He monitored traps, logging boundaries, and poaching activity. He lived alone, his life attuned to the rhythm of the woods. That week, he was surveying a hunting reserve after reports of wolves nearing villages. He rode out on his snowmobile before dawn, a canvas bag packed with essentials. He preferred working alone, claiming a second engine scared off wildlife. His assignment was simple: document animal tracks after the first full snow. Wolves had been increasingly active, driven from higher ground by a decline in wild boar numbers. Here, they could travel up to 20 miles in a single night, hunger driving them across the frozen ground. Their diet shifted with the seasons: deer in autumn, carrion, smaller mammals. In the hard months of winter, when prey vanished beneath ice or snow, instinct sometimes blurred into desperation. Locals warned of animals following sled trails at dusk. Nikolai heard the same warnings that morning, but didn't take them seriously. He checked his flare gun, but left his rifle behind, citing its weight. By noon, the weather shifted rapidly, with gusting snow and dropping visibility. His supervisor made several unanswered radio calls, assuming battery failure from the cold. When evening came and Nikolai still hadn't returned, Yevgeny, a neighboring ranger and longtime friend, prepared to follow his route. Evgeny rode out around 5 p.m. with a flashlight and a sidearm. The tracks were faint but visible, a single snowmobile line winding north, stopping abruptly about 800 meters from the ridge. The engine was half buried in snow, its headlight faintly glowing. Prints showed Nikolai had dismounted, perhaps to clear ice from the track. Around the site, another pattern emerged. Paw marks, deep and overlapping, circling. The snow bore drag lines, evidence of pacing. Then the circle tightened. From that point, the scene unfolded as a struggle. Human footprints turned erratic, moving backward. A snapped branch at chest height. A torn glove 10 feet away. A smear of blood marked the snowmobile's side panel. 30 feet beyond, the snow showed clear impressions of multiple bodies pressing down. Wolves and man. The wolves had likely approached silently, using the cover of snowfall and wind. Initial bites were to the legs, pulling him down. Blood spray against nearby birch bark indicated arterial injury within seconds. As the attack progressed, the evidence suggested coordinated movement. Bite patterns indicated coordinated restraint from multiple angles. His jacket was shredded along the spine, showing where one animal had clamped onto his back, while another tore at the neck. Boot prints ended mid-stride, replaced by drag marks. Ivani followed them cautiously, revolver drawn. The forest was unnervingly still. He found the body 30 meters downhill near a frozen stream. The snow around it was flattened and red. The wolves had likely fed briefly before retreating. Later investigations showed at least 4 individuals, 2 larger adults, 2 smaller juveniles. Ivani radioed the base immediately. It took nearly an hour for a snow vehicle to arrive, by which time darkness had swallowed the clearing. The men lifted the body onto a tarp, careful not to disturb the bite patterns for analysis. The stench of blood lingered even in the cold. The pack didn't return, but distant howls echoed as the rescuers secured the area. Nikolai's remains were taken to Dalna for examination. Autopsy confirmed catastrophic blood loss, with multiple punctures to major vessels and crushing trauma to the neck vertebrae consistent with a fatal bite. Time of death was estimated shortly after the onset of the attack. The official report listed predatory behavior exacerbated by winter scarcity. Specialists noted that 2016 saw an unusual decline in prey density across the region. The incident received a single mention on regional news, framed as a tragic encounter during severe weather. There was no footage, only photographs from the recovery team that were never released publicly. The Sunset Lakes community in Florida had an unexpected problem. Alligators. They'd been drawn in by a reliable food source. Ducks being fed by residents. And these weren't your average gators. Adult males can reach 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds, with jaws capable of exerting 3,000 pounds of pres per square inch. It's a force of nature that has remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. Walt, a recent transplant from Ohio, learned this the hard way. He'd moved to Florida to enjoy the year-round outdoor life, buying a home with water access where he could fish and feed the ducks. His evening routine involved sitting on his patio, watching the sunset, and tossing breadcrumbs to the waterfowl. One evening, Walt noticed his fishing lure was tangled in some vegetation near his dock. He waded into the knee-deep water to free it, something he'd done many times before without incident. But this time was different. Unbeknownst to Walt, A 12-foot alligator had been submerged and motionless near the dock for over an hour, waiting for the ducks. As Walt reached for his lure, the alligator exploded upward with devastating force, its jaws clamping down on Walt's right leg. The bite fractured his femur and severed major arteries. The alligator then initiated its signature death roll, spinning violently in the water, pulling Walt into the canal. The alligator dragged Walt toward the deeper center, where its superior swimming ability made escape impossible. Within minutes, Walt's movements ceased. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but it was too late. The alligator had already retreated with Walt's body. It was later discovered that Walt's duck feeding had inadvertently attracted the alligator to his property, leading to the fatal attack. The Sunset Lakes community quickly installed warning signs around all retention ponds and canals. It was a stark reminder that even in a seemingly peaceful setting, the wild can be unpredictable and dangerous. Just a few weeks later, on September 8, 2014, Michael Chen, a 35-year-old software engineer from Seattle, was on his first visit to the Florida Everglades. He was on a cross-country road trip, celebrating a recent promotion. He'd always been fascinated by technology and outdoor adventure, and his engineering background gave him confidence in analyzing risks. Michael had joined a small group airboat tour that promised close encounters with alligators and other Everglades wildlife. The tour guide, a weathered Floridian with decades of swamp experience, repeatedly warned passengers to remain seated and keep their hands inside the boat. These weren't just suggestions. They were rules for survival in a place where alligators, apex predators unchanged for 200 million years, ruled. I've always been captivated by the raw power of apex predators, how they perfectly embody their environment. The American alligator, for instance, is impeccably adapted as an ambush hunter in aquatic settings. Adult males can reach up to 14 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds. Their jaw muscles can exert over 3,000 pounds of press per square inch. They can launch themselves partially out of the water with explosive force, and they see any movement near their territory as either prey or a threat. I remember reading about a particularly tragic incident that underscores this point. An airboat tour was progressing smoothly when the guide spotted a massive alligator sunning itself on a mud bank, only about 20 feet away. The reptile was an exceptional specimen, easily 12 feet long and weighing over 800 pounds. It was perfectly still in the afternoon heat, a prehistoric form basking in the sun. One of the passengers, a man named Michael, began photographing this magnificent predator, excited to capture images of such an impressive wild animal. Sadly, his enthusiasm overtook his caution, and he leaned farther over the boat's edge to get closer shots. The fatal moment came when Michael's phone slipped from his grip and began falling toward the dark water. Without thinking, he lunged forward, desperately trying to catch his expensive device before it disappeared into the swamp. Unbeknownst to Michael, the massive alligator had been monitoring the boat's presence. His sudden movement triggered an immediate attack response. The 800-pound reptile exploded from the mudbank with terrifying speed, its powerful tail propelling it through the water like a missile aimed directly at Michael's exposed position. The alligator's massive jaws clamped down on Michael's outstretched arm with bone-crushing force. The bite press instantly shattered bones and severed major arteries. Michael's scream of shock and pain echoed across the swamp as the reptile's momentum pulled him completely over the side of the airboat and into the murky water. The tour guide and other passengers grabbed desperately at Michael's legs, trying to pull him back into the boat, while the alligator maintained its crushing grip on his arm. The alligator immediately began its signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its devastating grip. Michael's struggles grew weaker as the combination of massive blood loss, crushing injuries, and drowning overwhelmed his body. The alligator's grip never loosened as it continued the death roll with mechanical precision, each rotation causing additional trauma while ensuring its prey could not escape. Within minutes, Michael's movement ceased as the alligator's brutal assault proved fatal. The massive reptile dragged his body into deeper water, where it disappeared beneath the surface with its kill. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, but Michael's body was not recovered until the following day, when wildlife officials located the massive alligator and retrieved the remains. The tour company immediately implemented physical barriers around all passenger seating areas and enhanced safety briefings for future tours. Michael's death prompted his family to advocate for stricter safety regulations in the wildlife tourism industry. The incident highlighted the deadly consequences of ignoring safety warnings around apex predators and became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing photography over personal safety. It was July 8, 2017, and the Detroit summer heat shimmered off abandoned lots as Maria Santos loaded her car with dog food and water. At 28, she'd spent 5 years walking dogs by day and feeding Detroit's feral population by night. Recently laid off, she'd been spending more time in dangerous neighborhoods, trying to help animals most people considered beyond saving. The economic collapse had hit Detroit hard, leaving entire neighborhoods abandoned and creating perfect breeding grounds for packs of wild dogs. These weren't lost pets. They were second and third generation feral animals that had never known human kindness, surviving by scavenging and defending territory with savage efficiency. Maria's regular route took her through 6 abandoned lots, each home to a different pack. She knew their hierarchies, feeding schedules, and individual personalities. But the newest group concerned her the most. 6 dogs led by a large German Shepherd mix she'd nicknamed Alpha, including several animals she didn't recognize. This pack was hungrier, more aggressive, and less predictable than the others. But Maria's compassion overruled her caution. These animals needed help, and she was the only one willing to provide it. As twilight settled over the abandoned neighborhood, Maria parked near the lot where Alpha's pack had made their home. The area was a wasteland of broken concrete and waist-high weeds, perfect cover for animals that had learned to hunt and hide. Maria had been feeding this pack for 3 weeks, always maintaining a safe distance. But tonight felt different. The dogs seemed more agitated, their movements more coordinated, their attention more focused on her than the food. What she didn't realize was that pack dynamics had shifted with the addition of 3 new dogs, animals that saw humans not as providers, but as competitors. Alpha emerged from the shadows first, his 80-pound frame moving with predatory grace. Behind him came the others, a scarred pit bull mix, 2 smaller dogs, and 3 newcomers whose breeds were impossible to determine. Their eyes reflected the dim streetlight like mirrors. Maria began distributing food as always, tossing handfuls of kibble in different directions to prevent fighting. But tonight, the strategy backfired. Instead of dispersing to eat, the dogs began to... It's chilling to think about how quickly a familiar animal can revert to instinct. I remember reading about Maria, a woman in an abandoned neighborhood who was known for feeding a pack of stray dogs. She thought she was helping them, offering them kindness. But one day, that kindness turned to tragedy. The dogs, 6 in total, had surrounded her, their movements coordinated. When 2 of the smaller ones started fighting over food, she stepped in to break it up. That was the fatal mistake. In that instant, Alpha, the apparent leader, saw her not as a caregiver, but as competition. His lips curled back, and he attacked. The force of the 80-pound dog hitting her chest sent her reeling. His jaws clamped down on her arm, and the others joined in, their pack mentality overwhelming any memory of her generosity. They dragged her deeper into the lot. It was a coordinated attack that spoke to generations of predatory instincts, honed by years of survival. These weren't pets gone bad. They were wild animals who had learned to see humans as either threats or prey. By the time they finally backed away, Maria was gone. It took 3 days to capture the dogs, and they were euthanized. Rehabilitation was impossible. That story always makes me think of how easily we can misjudge our place in the natural world. It reminds me of another incident, this one involving chimpanzees. It was September 8, 2015, when Kendra Sullivan, a wildlife photographer, arrived at the Namba Island Chimpanzee Sanctuary in Uganda. The sanctuary was a haven for orphaned and rescued chimps, a semi-natural environment on a 100-acre forested island on Lake Victoria. I've often wondered about the precise moment when instinct takes over, when survival becomes the only imperative. In the case of Kendra, that moment arrived with a force of 300 pounds per square inch, the pres of a chimpanzee's bite. It fractured the bones in her forearm instantly. I can only imagine the horror, the sheer powerlessness she must have felt. Boso, driven by instinct, targeted her face, her neck, his massive canine teeth, over 2 inches long and razor-sharp, tearing into her. The attack, lasting nearly 2 minutes, was relentless. His jaws crushed facial bones, tore away skin and muscle, severing major blood vessels. Her attempts to defend herself were futile against his overwhelming strength. Her free hand was severely mutilated, several fingers crushed. It was a coordinated assault that left no chance of escape. Peter Sully's intervention with high-press water hoses managed to drive Boso away, but by then the catastrophic damage was done. Kendra died from blood loss and the sheer trauma of her injuries before help could arrive. The investigation that followed focused on security failures, a grim reminder of the unpredictable nature of wild animals and the importance of respecting their boundaries. Then there's the story of David Lasky and his cousin Jeff. February the 9th, 2014, near Langer, Saskatchewan. It began as a routine trip into the boreal forest, a landscape I know well from my own travels. David, a part-time wildlife photographer, and Jeff often joined him to retrieve SD cards from trail cams. They were familiar with the woods, with the wolves that roamed there. They'd heard distant howls before, but never close. David believed wolves avoided humans by instinct. Their plan was simple: a short snowmobile ride, a quick hike to the cameras, and back before dusk. Wolves in that region were typically grey, thick-coated animals, averaging about 90 pounds. They moved in coordinated packs, relying on patience and strategy rather than speed. Under normal circumstances, they avoided people, focusing on deer and moose. Dressed in insulated gear, carrying only a single red flare for safety, they set out. By 9:30 a.m., they parked their snowmobile and began walking through the packed snow. At first, everything seemed normal. They reached the first camera, swapped the SD card. Around 10:15, as they crossed a creek, Jeff slipped on a patch of ice. David crouched to help him up. That's when they noticed movement among the trees. The animals stood still at first, only their eyes catching the light. Jeff shouted, waving his arms, trying to scare them off. But the wolves didn't run. Unbeknownst to the men, a freshly killed deer lay half buried in the snow nearby. The pack was food-stressed, defending their kill rather than hunting. They began to fan out slowly, forming a loose semicircle. David tried to reason his cousin, muttering that they were just curious, that noise would drive them away. But even as he spoke, one of the wolves lowered its head and started advancing. Samples were taken from bite margins for DNA analysis, and the implicated pack was later trapped and relocated to a remote management zone north of Reindeer Lake. Wildlife biologists suggested the wolves had been defending a food cache, not actively hunting, but the distinction mattered little to those who saw the aftermath. That same day, Kevin Chen, a 16-year-old high school junior and varsity basketball player, was running late after practice and decided to take his usual shortcut through an undeveloped lot, rather than follow the longer route along the main road. Kevin was an honor student and star athlete who balanced academic excellence with athletic achievement, earning recognition as one of his school's most promising college prospects. He lived with his parents and younger sister in a modern home that backed up against the natural open space that made Canyon Vista such a desirable address. Kevin often used the informal trails and vacant lots to move quickly between his home and school, a practice that had never caused any problems during his 4 years in the neighborhood. The Canyon Vista area had been experiencing increased wildlife activity following a series of devastating wildfires that had burned thousands of acres in the surrounding mountains. The fires had displaced numerous predators, forcing them to seek new territory and food sources in areas they had previously avoided. Local authorities had issued warnings about mountain lion sightings in residential areas, but most residents viewed these as routine precautions rather than serious threats. Kevin was aware of the wildlife warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals during his frequent use of the neighborhood's informal trail system. He carried his basketball gear in a backpack and typically moved quickly through the undeveloped areas, confident that his familiarity with the terrain and his athletic ability would keep him safe from any potential threats. Mountain lions are solitary predators that require large territories to support their hunting needs, with adult males controlling ranges of up to 100 square miles. Juvenile males are particularly dangerous as they establish new territories, often displaying more aggressive behavior than experienced adults. These young cats are less skilled at hunting natural prey and may target easier victims, including domestic animals and occasionally humans. Mountain lions are capable of incredible stealth and can stalk prey for extended periods before launching surprise attacks from close range. As Kevin jogged through the overgrown vacant lot, he was unaware that an 80 lb juvenile male mountain lion had been using the area as a hunting ground for domestic cats and small dogs that wandered from nearby homes. Brandon had built his personal training business through dedication, developing a reputation for helping clients overcome their fears and achieve seemingly impossible fitness goals. His confident personality and fearless approach had made him popular, though his success had perhaps made him overconfident. That afternoon, Brandon paid the rancher's exorbitant fee for a private photo session with Sasha, a 300-pound female Bengal tiger who had been hand-raised from a cub. The ranch owner, a former circus trainer with decades of experience handling big cats, agreed to supervise the session, repeatedly emphasizing the extreme dangers involved. Bengal tigers are among the world's most powerful predators, with adult females weighing up to 350 pounds. They possess incredible strength, speed, and hunting instincts that remain sharp regardless of human contact. These magnificent cats are solitary, territorial animals that can become extremely aggressive when their personal space is violated. Their powerful jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch, while their razor-sharp claws can grow up to 4 inches long. The photo session began with Brandon positioned outside Sasha's enclosure, capturing dramatic shots of himself posed near the massive predator while maintaining the safety barrier between them. However, Brandon quickly became frustrated with the distance, believing he needed closer contact to create the dramatic photos he had envisioned. He convinced the ranch owner to allow him closer access to Sasha, arguing that his physical conditioning and confident energy would keep the tiger calm. Against his better judgment and all established safety protocols, the owner agreed to let Brandon enter a smaller holding area adjacent to Sasha's main enclosure. The holding area was separated from Sasha's territory by only a chain-link barrier, bringing Brandon within arm's reach of the massive predator. Brandon began posing for his camera, which was mounted on a tripod and set to take photos automatically. His fatal mistake was crouching down next to the barrier and extending his hand towards Sasha, believing that his confident demeanor would demonstrate his dominance over the apex predator. The tiger's ears flattened slightly against her massive head, and her tail began twitching with increasing frequency. Sasha's attack was swift and devastating. The moment Brandon moved suddenly to adjust his pose for another photo, The tiger's hunting instincts activated with explosive force. Sasha launched herself at the barrier with tremendous power, her massive paws striking the chain-link fencing, while her razor-sharp claws found purchase on Brandon's extended arm. The tiger's incredible strength pulled Brandon against the barrier, while her powerful jaws snapped at his position through the fencing. The tiger's claws raked across Brandon's arm and shoulder, opening deep gashes that immediately began bleeding profusely, while her crushing grip prevented any possibility of retreat. The ranch owner rushed to intervene, using emergency protocols to distract Sasha and force her to release her grip on Brandon. However, the tiger's claws had already caused catastrophic damage to Brandon's arm and shoulder, severing major arteries and causing massive blood loss that quickly overwhelmed his system. Brandon collapsed from shock and blood loss within minutes of the attack, his physical conditioning proving useless against injuries that no human could. I've seen what desperation can do, how easily it can erode judgment. It's a lesson etched in the tragic story of Tommy Rodriguez, a man whose financial woes led him down a path that ended in unimaginable horror. He ran puppy mills, you see, but it was the way he tried to cut corners that ultimately cost him everything. August 19th, 2013. The Missouri heat was heavy, thick with the stench of neglect that clung to every corner of Tommy Rodriguez's illegal breeding operation. He was 45, and for over a decade he'd been running these mills. But the money was tight, forcing him to make choices that would prove fatal. His 20-acre property was a labyrinth of makeshift kennels and converted sheds, housing nearly 80 dogs in various states of breeding and neglect. He specialized in popular breeds, selling them for high prices to unsuspecting buyers. But the real money, I learned, came from the security he employed. 4 massive dogs patrolling the perimeter, 2 cane corsos, each weighing over 120 pounds, and 2 mastiff mixes tipping the scales at nearly 140. These weren't pets. They were weapons, trained to be aggressive, acquired from a defunct fighting operation. The financial press that ultimately led to Tommy's demise had been building for months. Veterinary bills, feed costs, and facility maintenance had eaten into his profits. Increased scrutiny from animal welfare organizations had forced him to operate more carefully, but he'd been cutting back on everything: food, medical care, even basic maintenance. The guard dogs, once fed premium meat, were now reduced to scraps and cheap kibble. Tommy didn't realize that hungry guard dogs are exponentially more dangerous than well-fed ones. Hunger sharpened their predatory instincts, made them more territorial, and reduced their tolerance for human presence. The dogs had been showing signs of increased aggression for weeks. They'd begun fighting among themselves over food, marking territory more aggressively, and showing less deference to Tommy's commands. A smart operator would have recognized these warning signs, but Tommy was desperate, distracted, and dangerously overconfident. On that sweltering August night, Tommy made his final rounds of the property, checking on breeding females and security systems. It was past midnight, and the Missouri countryside was silent except for distant barking and the hum of inadequate ventilation fans. He carried a flashlight and a metal rod for moving aggressive animals, but his attention was focused on financial calculations rather than the danger lurking in the shadows. The guard dogs had been without food for 3 days, not by design, but because Tommy had been too busy dealing with a sick litter to maintain their feeding schedule. Their hunger had reached a critical point where survival instincts overrode years of conditioning. They were no longer guard dogs protecting property. They were predators looking for their next meal. Tommy's mistake was approaching the area where he kept the guard dogs without proper precautions. Normally, he would have fed them first, ensuring their compliance before entering their territory. But financial stress and exhaustion had made him careless, and he walked directly into their domain, carrying nothing but a flashlight and false confidence. The attack began when Brutus, the larger cane corso, emerged from the shadows near the feeding area. His 125-pound frame moved with surprising silence. His massive head lowered in a hunting posture that Tommy should have recognized as a threat. Behind him came the others: Titan, the second cane corso; Rex, a 140-pound Mastiff mix; and Scar, whose scarred muzzle told the story of his fighting background. Tommy realized the danger too late. As he turned to retreat, Brutus launched himself forward, his powerful jaws clamping down on Tommy's left eye with crushing force. The impact drove Tommy to the ground, his flashlight spinning away into darkness as he screamed for help that would never come. The other 3 dogs joined the attack within seconds, their pack instincts fully engaged. Rex grabbed Tommy's right arm, his massive jaws crushing bone as he shook violently. Titan went for the torso, his teeth tearing through clothing and flesh with mechanical efficiency. Scar circled the attack, darting in to bite and retreat, his fighting experience evident in his tactical approach. Tommy's screams echoed across the empty countryside, but his nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away. The dogs worked with the coordination of experienced predators. Their attacks focused on disabling their prey rather than killing quickly. They had learned patience in their previous lives, and hunger had made them methodical in their violence. The assault continued for nearly 20 minutes, with the dogs taking turns feeding on Tommy while he was still alive. His struggles grew weaker as blood loss and shock took their toll, but the animals showed no mercy. They had been conditioned to view violence as normal, hunger as constant, and humans as either threats or food sources. The animals he exploited ultimately became his executioners. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? Their hunger and desperation turned them into the very monsters he tried to create. I've read accounts of animals turning on their owners before, but Tommy's story, it always struck me as particularly bleak. His body lay broken and partially consumed in the dirt near the feeding area, surrounded by the very dogs he used to guard his illegal operation. The guard dogs retreated, their hunger temporarily sated, but their aggression remained. Tommy's body went undiscovered for 3 weeks. The dogs, left to their own devices, continued to feed on his remains. The rest of his breeding operation slowly collapsed. Other dogs, trapped in kennels without food or water, began to starve. The stench of death eventually attracted authorities investigating reports of animal cruelty. When sheriff's deputies finally arrived, they found a scene of unimaginable horror. Tommy's remains were scattered across the feeding area, while dozens of dead and dying dogs filled makeshift kennels. The 4 guard dogs were shot on sight after showing aggressive behavior towards the officers. The investigation revealed the full extent of Tommy's illegal operation. Dozens of breeding females kept in deplorable conditions, puppies dying from disease and neglect, and financial records showing he'd been selling sick animals to unsuspecting buyers across multiple states. The surviving dogs were euthanized due to their poor health and aggressive conditioning. Tommy's death marked the end of one of Missouri's largest illegal puppy mills, but it came at a cost that extended far beyond his own life. Then there's the story of Roberto Mendez. It was August 22, 2014. The exclusive Cypress Point community on the edge of the Florida Everglades was shimmering in the intense summer heat. This gated development, built on reclaimed wetlands and featuring artificial lakes and water features, represented the height of luxury living in South Florida. Roberto, a 35-year-old landscaper, was working alone to maintain the pristine grounds that made Cypress Point so desirable. He had built his landscaping company from nothing, starting with a single lawnmower and gradually expanding to serve some of the area's wealthiest communities. He took pride in his work and was known for his attention to detail. Through his business, Roberto supported his wife and 2 young children, often working long hours in the Florida heat to provide for his family's future. The Cypress Point development had been constructed on former Everglades wetlands. Developers created an elaborate system of decorative ponds and water features connected to natural waterways through canals and drainage systems. The artificial lakes were stocked with ornamental fish and surrounded by tropical landscaping that required constant maintenance. Recent heavy rains had raised water levels throughout the region, creating ideal conditions for wildlife movement between natural and artificial water systems. Roberto was familiar with Florida's wildlife. He'd encountered alligators, snakes, and other dangerous animals during his years of outdoor work. He maintained a healthy respect for these creatures and typically checked water features carefully before working near them. But on this particular afternoon, he was trimming decorative bushes around one of the community's smaller ornamental ponds when his expensive hedge trimmer slipped from his hands and fell into the shallow water. American alligators are perfectly camouflaged ambush predators. They can remain motionless for hours, waiting for prey to approach. Adult females typically measure 8 to 10 feet in length and can weigh up to 200 pounds, possessing incredible speed and power when attacking. Alligators are most dangerous when protecting nesting sites, or when surprised by humans who venture into their territory. Their bite force exceeds 2,000 pounds per square inch, and their death roll technique is designed to disorient and drown prey in aquatic environments. Roberto waded into the knee-deep ornamental pond to retrieve his hedge trimmer, assuming the manicured water feature was safe for brief entry. The decorative pond appeared peaceful and well-maintained, with no visible signs of wildlife activity among the carefully arranged aquatic plants. Roberto had worked around similar water features hundreds of times without incident. The attack came the moment Roberto's feet touched the pond's muddy bottom. A 10-foot female alligator, lying motionless among the decorative vegetation, exploded into action. Her powerful jaws clamped down on Roberto's right leg with devastating force. The massive reptile's bite instantly fractured his tibia and fibula, while her teeth punctured through major arteries and muscle tissue. The alligator immediately initiated her signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining her crushing grip. The violent rotation pulled Roberto off his feet and into the deeper center of the pond, where the gator's aquatic advantages became overwhelming. Roberto's desperate attempts to break free only triggered the alligator's instincts to bite down harder and roll more aggressively. Roberto's screams echoed across the manicured grounds as the alligator continued her relentless death roll. The spinning motion dislocated Roberto's knee and hip, while causing massive internal bleeding and tissue damage. The ornamental pond's clear water turned red as Roberto's struggles grew weaker with each rotation. A homeowner working in his garden heard Roberto's cries and rushed to investigate. I've spent years studying apex predators, but some stories still haunt me. The arrogance of some people, their utter disregard for the natural world, sometimes leads to unimaginable tragedy. I remember reading about a woman named Tara Whitfield. Her story is a stark reminder of the ocean's unforgiving power. It was March 22, 2017, when Tara arrived at the Neptune Islands off the coast of South Australia. These remote, rocky outcrops jutted from the ocean, surrounded by crystal-clear waters plunging to depths of over 200 feet. These nutrient-rich waters served as a natural highway for migrating great whites, drawing them to hunt the abundant seal colonies. Tara, a 38-year-old marine biology graduate student from Los Angeles, had booked the most expensive shark cage diving package and immediately began making unreasonable demands. Known for her entitled attitude, she berated Captain Steve Morrison and marine biologist Dr. Lisa Chen multiple times during the morning briefing. Her boyfriend, Brad Mitchell, watched uncomfortably as Tara screamed at the crew for their pathetic safety restrictions. Captain Morrison, with 18 years of experience, had dealt with difficult clients before. But Tara's aggressive behavior and lack of empathy alarmed him. She demanded that the protective cage be removed, claiming she deserved unrestricted access to the sharks because she had paid a premium price. When Dr. Chen tried to explain the life-threatening dangers, Tara dismissed her as an incompetent employee, jealous of successful people. Tara had convinced herself that her graduate student status and expensive booking fee entitled her to special treatment. She threatened to destroy the company's reputation online and file lawsuits if the crew didn't provide her with the extreme experience she demanded. Her complete disregard for safety became evident when she suggested that crew members should enter the water first to test whether the sharks were dangerous. The waters around Neptune Islands hosted some of the largest great white sharks on Earth, apex predators that had ruled these seas for over 400 million years. These magnificent hunters can reach lengths of over 20 feet and weights exceeding 4,000 pounds, with massive triangular heads housing rows of razor-sharp, serrated teeth. Each tooth measures up to 3 inches in length and is designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Great whites possess the most powerful bite force of any living creature, capable of exerting over 4,000 pounds per square inch of crushing press. The crew had successfully attracted multiple great white sharks using a carefully prepared chum mixture. Among the responding predators was a massive 18-foot female, estimated to weigh over 4,000 pounds, that had been feeding aggressively on the bait. The enormous shark displayed classic hunting behaviors, circling the boat with calculated precision while investigating the steel diving cage. Before entering the water, Tara secretly loosened the connections on her diving regulator, planning to create a fake equipment malfunction that would justify exiting the protective cage. She believed she was clever enough to manipulate the situation to get the unrestricted shark access she felt entitled to. Once submerged in the protective cage, Tara immediately began signaling fake distress to the surface crew, pointing frantically at her sabotaged regulator. Captain Morrison initiated emergency procedures to bring her to the surface. But instead of ascending, Tara swam away from the cage toward the feeding sharks, believing her superior intelligence made her invulnerable. Her erratic swimming movements created the exact type of distressed prey behavior that triggers great white hunting instincts. The massive female great white detected Tara's panicked swimming immediately and abandoned the chum bait to investigate this new potential prey. The enormous predator approached from below at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. The shark's assault was swift and devastating. Rising from the depths like a living torpedo, the great white struck Tara from below with tremendous force, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of gleaming, serrated teeth. Hank, as everyone called him, was 71. He moved slowly between the enclos, carrying water with the confidence that came from 20 years of dog breeding. He and his wife, Martha, had built their operation from nothing, specializing in Rottweilers and German Shepherds. What had started as a hobby had grown into a modest business, with 8 breeding females and 3 males producing litters they sold across the southeast. But age had made Hank careless about safety protocols. In his younger days, he never would have entered a kennel alone, especially with breeding males during territorial phases. He'd seen what these dogs could do, the power in their jaws, the speed of their attacks. But experience had bred overconfidence. The centerpiece of their operation was Brutus, a 130-pound Rottweiler whose massive frame made him their most sought-after stud. At 4 years old, he was in his prime, with a bloodline tracing back to German working dogs. His offspring commanded premium prices from buyers seeking protection animals. Recently, though, Brutus had been showing increased aggression. A minor injury to his left rear leg had left him limping and irritable, causing him to snap at Martha when she tried to examine the wound. The veterinarian had prescribed pain medication, but the dog's temperament had grown increasingly unpredictable. Martha had expressed concerns about Hank working alone with Brutus, especially given the dog's recent mood changes. But Hank dismissed her worries with stubborn confidence. He'd raised Brutus from a puppy and believed their bond was unbreakable. On that March afternoon, Martha had driven into town for supplies, leaving Hank alone with the dogs. The kennels needed cleaning. Water bowls required filling. Work Hank had done thousands of times before. Brutus watched from his kennel as Hank approached, the dog's dark eyes tracking every movement with an intensity that should have served as a warning. The animal was panting heavily despite the shade, his injured leg causing him to shift uncomfortably. Pain has a way of making even docile animals unpredictable, and Brutus was far from docile. Hank unlocked the kennel gate and stepped inside, bucket in hand, his attention focused on the dirty water bowl in the corner. He'd performed this routine hundreds of times. But today, Brutus was different. The dog's ears were pinned back, his tail held low, his massive body coiled with tension. As Hank bent down to clean the water bowl, his back turned to the dog. Brutus made his decision. There was no growling, no warning, just 130 pounds of muscle launching through the air with devastating force. The impact drove Hank face first into the concrete floor, his bucket clattering away as Brutus's jaws found their target. The dog's teeth sank deep into Hank's throat, crushing his windpipe and severing major blood vessels in a single, catastrophic bite. Hank's hands clawed desperately at the animal's massive head, but Brutus had locked on with predatory determination. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone with mechanical efficiency. Hank's screams were cut short by the damage to his throat, replaced by a wet, gurgling sound that grew weaker by the second. Blood pooled beneath his body as Brutus continued his attack, driven by instincts bred into his lineage for generations. The assault lasted less than 3 minutes, but the damage was irreversible. When Brutus finally released his grip, Hank lay motionless on the kennel floor, his life ebbing away in the Alabama heat. Martha returned home 2 hours later to find the property strangely quiet. She called out for Hank as she walked toward the kennels, but received no response. When she rounded the corner and saw Brutus standing guard over her husband's body, the full horror became clear. The dog's reaction to Martha's presence was immediate and threatening. He positioned himself between her and Hank's body, his lips pulled back in a snarl. Martha backed away slowly, dialing 911 from her truck. Sheriff's deputies arrived within 20 minutes, but Brutus refused to allow anyone near Hank's body. After consulting with animal control, the decision was made to shoot Brutus rather than risk additional casualties. The massive Rottweiler died with 3 bullets in his chest. The investigation concluded that Hank's death was a tragic accident caused by his failure to recognize warning signs of an aggressive, injured animal. The breeding operations was shut down, the remaining dogs relocated, and Martha was left to grieve both her husband and the animal that had been part of their family. Then there was September 3rd, 2013, near the Toklat River in Denali National Park, Alaska. By early afternoon, the wind had dropped and the landscape stood still, open and silent. From a distance, it looked calm, a place where nothing could happen quickly. But the quiet there was deceptive. Sarah Miller, 26, was an experienced backpacker from Anchorage. I've always been drawn to stories of survival, especially those that test the boundaries between respect for nature and the harsh realities it can present. The case of Sarah came to mind as I was preparing for tonight. She was a seasoned solo traveller who ventured into the Denali backcountry, aiming to coincide with the caribou migration near the Tlat River, a place where wolves were often seen trailing the herds. She carried bear spray, a GPS beacon, and enough supplies for 2 nights. Sarah wasn't intimidated by travelling alone. She'd been doing it for years, often sharing her experiences on small hiking blogs. She had the required permits for the Denali backcountry zones. Rangers remembered she'd inquired about late-season wolf activity, but she didn't seem worried, even when told that sightings had increased near the river. Wolves were tracking the caribou herds migrating south, and fresh tracks had been spotted just days before. To Sarah, it was simply part of the environment, one she respected, not feared. The wolves in that region typically weighed between 70 and 100 pounds. Built for endurance and speed, they could cover 40 miles in a day, with a bite force of nearly 400 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush bone. They rarely bothered people, mainly living on caribou, hares, and ground squirrels. But when prey became scarce, or if a human scent carried traces of food, their curiosity could be piqued. That week, rangers had posted warnings near trailheads, noting that several hikers had reported wolves trailing them at a distance. Sarah likely saw those warnings when she signed out, though there was no record of her changing her route. She was confident in her precautions. Statistically, Denali's wolves avoided confrontation. Around 4:00 p.m., a tourist group driving on the park road spotted a lone figure standing on a gravel bar below the ridge. It was Sarah. She waved before continuing upstream toward her campsite. She reached her final GPS coordinate sometime before 4:45 p.m. The last photos on her recovered camera showed wide views of the river valley and a small group of wolves following a caribou herd in the distance. Tracks found later showed she moved off the main gravel bar toward higher ground, likely planning to cut inland. The first sign of a struggle began about half a mile from her tent. Her GPS unit recorded erratic movement, rapid looping, then a sudden stop. Investigators reconstructed what happened next through physical evidence and predator behavior analysis. The wolves had changed course toward her position once the herd passed out of sight. Sarah likely saw them coming. She deployed her bear spray once, and residue was found on nearby vegetation. But the wind shifted westward that afternoon, causing some of the spray to blow back. It worked briefly, driving the wolves back about 20 feet before the cloud dispersed. They began to circle again, perhaps emboldened by the fading chemical scent. One part of the group approached from behind as she retreated up a shallow embankment. Handprints pressed deep into the soil showed she climbed in haste. Blood marks began at the top of the slope. One wolf likely lunged first, grabbing her backpack or arm. The straps were torn clean through, consistent with a pulling force rather than a cut. A second wolf joined, biting her thigh. She tried to fight back. The spray canister lay empty beside her pack, but the group coordinated, one attacking from the rear, the others darting forward. The ground at the site was churned with soil and hair, suggesting several minutes of movement before she was forced down. Analysis of tissue marks later revealed crushing bites to the neck and shoulder, consistent with a killing grip. the kind wolves used to suffocate large prey. Her jacket was shredded, and the torn sleeve, recovered 20 feet away, still held fragments of skin and fabric. Search efforts began that night, with both ground crews and a helicopter dispatched after rangers noticed her vehicle unmoved. The aircraft spotted a disturbed patch of gravel near the Tlat Channel the next morning. Sarah's body lay partially covered by soil and debris, her left arm missing, likely carried off by scavengers after the attack. They collected the camera and other items for analysis, and later confirmed through timestamps that her final photograph was taken just 6 minutes before the estimated time of death. The park temporarily closed multiple backcountry zones along the migration corridor. Genetic sampling confirmed the wolves belonged to the Talat pack. Investigators determined the attack began as a predatory test or prey proxy response that escalated fatally. But with no repeated approach or food-seeking behavior observed, no removals were ordered. At a private meeting, rangers explained the findings to Sarah's parents, who later issued a short statement urging that the park not punish what it protects. Then, on April 14, 2018, Monica Barrett arrived at Everglades National Park in Florida, one of the largest tropical wilderness areas in the United States. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched across 1.5 million acres of sawgrass marshes and shallow waterways, home to some of North America's most dangerous predators. The park's intricate network of channels created the perfect habitat for massive American alligators. Monica Barrett, a 44-year-old divorce attorney from Miami, had booked a solo kayak tour to clear her head after a difficult custody case. Known for her aggressive courtroom tactics and confrontational personality, she had built her legal career on intimidating opponents and refusing to back down from any challenge. Her reputation for getting her way through sheer force of will had created a dangerous sense of entitlement. Tommy Rodriguez, a 52-year-old tour guide with over 20 years of experience, immediately recognized Monica as a problematic client during the morning safety briefing. She had interrupted his presentation. "I've seen what alligators can do, the crushing force of their bite, the death roll. It's something you don't forget. I remember reading one account of a woman named Monica who dismissed warnings about alligators during nesting season. She'd even threatened to sue a park guide. It was peak alligator breeding season, a time when male alligators are incredibly aggressive, guarding their nesting areas. Park officials usually restrict access then, posting warning signs. Adult male alligators can reach up to 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds. They have one of the most powerful bite forces in the animal kingdom, capable of exerting over 3,000 pounds per square inch. Tommy, the tour guide, repeatedly warned everyone to stay within designated channels. Monica, however, grew increasingly belligerent, accusing Tommy of violating her constitutional rights. She broke away from the tour and paddled her kayak toward a restricted lagoon, ignoring the multiple warning signs. She claimed she had every right to explore the park. That lagoon was a primary nesting area for a massive 12-foot bull alligator. The 800-pound reptile had been defending his territory for weeks, driving off smaller males. Monica's kayak immediately triggered his aggressive instincts. He detected the vibrations from her paddle strokes within seconds. He'd been resting motionless beneath the surface, perfectly camouflaged. The alligator's attack was swift and devastating. He launched himself from the water, his jaws clamping down on Monica's kayak, capsizing it, and throwing her into the murky water. As Monica struggled, the alligator identified her as a threat. His jaws found purchase on her torso, his razor-sharp teeth puncturing her life jacket, chest, and abdomen. The crushing bite shattered ribs while puncturing lungs and severing blood vessels. Then, he began his signature killing technique, the death roll. He rotated rapidly in the water, spinning Monica's body, maintaining his grip. The violent rotation tore muscles and caused catastrophic internal injuries. The death roll continued for over a minute, filling her punctured lungs with water. The crushing press prevented her from breathing. Her shattered ribs ground against each other, causing more internal bleeding. The combination of trauma, drowning, and blood loss proved fatal within minutes. Tommy radioed for help, but rescue teams couldn't reach the remote lagoon in time. Then there was Sarah Johnson. It was May 14th, 2017. The Great Smoky Mountains rose majestically above the Tennessee landscape, their peaks shrouded in mist. The late spring afternoon was perfect for hiking. Sarah, a 29-year-old registered nurse from Atlanta, was enjoying a weekend hiking trip with her fiancé, Tom. She loved nature photography and always carried her camera. Her medical background gave her a practical understanding of emergencies. But her experience with dangerous wildlife was limited. Sarah had been hiking throughout the Southeast for years, building her confidence. She worked long shifts at a busy trauma center, and these mountain getaways provided essential stress relief. That afternoon, Sarah and Tom were hiking through a remote alpine meadow when they saw something extraordinary. 2 black bear cubs playing in the tall grass, their mother nowhere in sight. Sarah immediately knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime photo opportunity. It's a chilling thought that North America's most common bear, the black bear, becomes exponentially more dangerous when it's a mother with cubs. Their protective instincts are so strong that they view any human presence as a mortal threat to their young. They will attack without warning. And they are incredibly fast, able to run up to 30 miles per hour through dense forests. I remember reading the story of Sarah, who was on an engagement trip with her fiancé Tom. They were in an area known for its wildlife, hoping to capture some incredible memories. What happened next is a stark reminder of the power of nature and the importance of respecting boundaries. Sarah spotted some adorable bear cubs in a meadow and began taking photographs. She thought she was at a safe distance, but her excitement grew. She wanted better shots, so she gradually moved closer. Tom repeatedly urged her to keep her distance, to leave the area, but Sarah was convinced the mother bear wasn't nearby. For nearly 10 minutes, she documented the cubs' playful behavior, capturing dozens of images. Sarah's fatal mistake was positioning herself between the cubs and their natural escape route to the forest edge. As she moved to get a better angle, she unknowingly blocked their path to safety. This triggered the protective instincts of the mother bear, who had been watching from the tree line. The mother bear's charge was swift and terrifying. This 200-pound female covered the distance to Sarah in mere seconds. Her powerful legs propelled her with surprising speed. Her fury focused entirely on eliminating the perceived threat to her cubs. Sarah tried to retreat when she saw the charging bear, but her foot caught on a fallen log, and she tumbled backward, still clutching her camera. The bear reached Sarah before she could regain her footing, striking her with bone-crushing force. Her massive paw connected with Sarah's back, her razor-sharp claws raking across Sarah's spine and shoulders, while the impact shattered several ribs. Sarah's camera flew from her grip as the bear's enormous weight pinned her to the ground. Her attempts to call for help were silenced by the crushing prise on her chest. The mother bear's powerful jaws clamped down on Sarah's neck, her crushing bite force fracturing vertebrae and severing vital arteries. The bear's protective instincts drove her to continue the assault until she was certain the threat to her cubs had been completely eliminated. Within minutes, Sarah's movement ceased. The mother bear's brutal assault proved fatal. The protective mother remained near Sarah's body for several more minutes, ensuring the threat was neutralized before gathering her cubs and disappearing into the dense forest. Park rangers arrived over an hour later in response to Tom's emergency call, but Sarah was already dead from massive trauma. The bear family was tracked but left undisturbed, as wildlife officials determined the mother had been acting within normal protective behavioral patterns when defending her young. Sarah's death devastated the hiking community and prompted enhanced educational programs about wildlife safety and proper distance protocols. Her family established a foundation promoting wilderness safety education, ensuring her passion for conservation would continue through enhanced protection for both wildlife and outdoor enthusiasts.